What is the first reason for the holiday of Lag BaOmer?
He passed away.
What is the first reason for the holiday of Lag BaOmer? That the Rabbi Akiva students stopped dying. The Rabbi Akiva students stopped dying. I looked up the Gemara, by the way. The Gemara does say Kula Meis MiPesach V'ad Atzeres, that they died between Pesach and Shavuos. The Gemara says that. But the idea that they stopped dying on Lag BaOmer does not say in the Gemara. That says in the Rishonim. Question 2. What are the earliest sources for this holiday? So in the Likutei Sichos, Chelik Beis, the Rebbe brings a Meiri. Meiri is in the later Rishonim, but he quotes the Gaonim. In other words, going back to literally a couple of hundred years after the Gemara was written, there's already a written record of Lag BaOmer. So Lag BaOmer is a holiday that has a sufficiently early source for us to say that it's completely historical. In other words, it's not Ruach HaKodesh. There's a historical record going back till the time when these events happened that speaks to the idea that Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim stopped to die. Okay? So that's the answers to questions 1 and 2. Question 3.
Wait, what was the question for? What was the answer for number 2?
The Meiri, and he quotes Gaonim. You see, the Meiri lived probably 800 years ago, but the Gaonim, you're talking 1300 years ago, 1200 years ago. You know, when was the Gemara written? Around 1500 years ago. 1550 years ago, yeah? From the time of the Gemara until the time of the Rishonim is a very long period, about 500 years. And the Gaonim, for the most part, lived in Bavel. They lived in Iraq. And we have very little written Torah from them for various reasons. They wrote very little. The Rishonim wrote much more. The Rishonim begins with Rashi, you understand? Maybe the Rif. But the Gaonim who lived in Iraq wrote much less. The Meiri had a Gaon who we don't have, who speaks about Lag BaOmer being the day when the Talmidim of Akiva stopped to die. Question 3. What is the second reason for the celebration of Lag BaOmer? The answer, of course, is, do you have one of these? The answer to this is that Rabbi Shimon Yochai did pass away. Now, of course, this is a great irony. It's a great irony, right? You have a Yom Tov for 2 reasons. A, they didn't die. B, he passed away. That doesn't work.
You're having a Yom. The reason for the Yom Tov is that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai passed away?
Yes.
And he said you should eat that.
Because Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, on the day of his passing, you should celebrate. I discussed this at length last time. We'll get to it in a second. What mistake did I make that was recently corrected about that? Oh, I said in many classes that the first celebration of Lag BaOmer in Miron was by the Arizal. The Arizal lived about 500 years ago, right? Shin Lamed Gimel, so it's 450 years ago. Is this year 450 years since Arizal passed away? I think so. No, today's Tafshin Pei. 2 years ago would have been 450 years since Arizal passed away. The Arizal went to Miron. They took his son to Miron to give him his first haircut. So I said in a number of my classes that the first celebration of Lag BaOmer was by the Arizal. We need to say, the reason of Talmidei Rabbi Akiva stopping to die, you have a record historically that goes back from the time the story happened. The second reason is that in the Zohar there is the story of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai passing away. And in the Zohar we had the story of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai passing away. You have Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai say to his students, "Be b'simcha." That's how we know he's supposed to be b'simcha Lag BaOmer. But in the Zohar it doesn't say a day. It simply says a story. Who linked the story to the day? So I said it was the Arizal. And I explained to you in the class that, again, you guys been to Israel, yeah? You meet kvarim of so many tzaddikim. You go to Israel, you meet of so many tzaddikim, right? How do we know where Hillel is buried? How do we know where Shammai is buried? How do we know where Rabbi Akiva is buried? How do we know where Shmai and Avta? How do we know where, like a guy went and told me, Rabbi Chananya ben Akashya is buried? How do we know? These Kvarim have not been there for 2,000 years. The Arizal walked around. And he would stop and say, oh, here's this tzaddik, here's this tzaddik, here's this tzaddik. The Arizal was so great. The Arizal was so great. And he lived all of 36 years. All of 30 years. The Arizal was so great that in his lifetime he was a legend. And he had no hisnagdus. Imagine that the Baal Shem Tov wouldn't have hisnagdus. Imagine that the Rebbe wouldn't have hisnagdus. Imagine that the Rambam wouldn't have hisnagdus. The greatest Gedolei Yisrael, who made the biggest changes, had the greatest opposition. Why did Rambam people hate the Rambam? Because he was a bold man. He did what he needed to do, whether people liked it or not. Why do people not like the Baal Shem Tov, the Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe? Why? They made changes. The Arizal was so great, he made huge changes in Yiddishkeit and in Kabbalah, and no one said boo. When you go all over Eretz Yisrael and you see the grave of Tanaim and Amirayim, we know that not because there's a historical record of these places, because the Arizal walked around and said, here is him and here is him, and nobody questions the Arizal. It's fantastic. I don't know of any other Gadol B'Yisrael who has such a distinction. It's unbelievable. To be as great and as radical as the Arizal was, and no one comes out and says, who's this guy that's making up all this stuff? Nobody said boo. That's how great Arizal was. And I said that Arizal was the one who revealed that Lag Ba'im is the yahrzeit of Reb Shem Bar Yochai. So a guy heard me say it in a class, and he came to correct me, and I appreciate every correction that I get. He's a grandnephew of Rabbi Shazalik Margolis, who was a very, very famous Makubal in Eretz Yisrael. In the words of this younger man, he's the one who brought back the celebration of Miran. They used to go to Miran and make a fire and do dancing, right? The Muslims didn't like it. So they outlawed it. And if you would go to Miran to make a celebration, they would arrest you and put you in jail. Rabbi Shazal Margol lived in Yerushalayim. He was there when the Frierdiker Rebbe came in 1929. He went back to Miran and made a celebration, and apparently in the beginning it was a Mesiras Nefesh. He was risking his life. He was taking a chance. In other words, his Muslim leadership did not let him do it. He recreated the Hilul Rashbi. He has a sefer called Hilul Rashbi. And in this sefer, Hilul Rashbi, he writes a historical account of celebrating in Miran 100 years before the Arizal. Before the Arizal.
Was he suicidal?
He was Pashtach Sid Shi'id.
I mean, I don't know. It sounds like this.
Who does he record as the first person to make a celebration in Iran? Rabbi Vadia Bartenura, who was an Italian Jew, who were the Pirush HaMishnayos that we all learn. And Rabbi Vadia Bartenura traveled. And he has a record. He wrote a journal, which is very famous. It's one of the famous letters, and there's not a lot of letters in Jewish history, but this is one of the famous letters. He traveled different places, and one of the places he was in Miran Lag Ba'emet, and he saw a celebration. So I don't know who disclosed that Lag Ba'emet is the Hilul Rashbi, but it was not that Arizal. It was before. But like I said, there's no record in the Rishonim. It doesn't say in the Me'iri that the Go'inim said that Lag Ba'emet there, Reb Shem Bar Yochai passed away. It says in the Me'iri that the Go'inim said that on Lag Ba'emet none of Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim died, and that was the reason for a Yom Tov. Anyway, so I don't know who revealed that Lag Ba'emet is the yahrzeit of the Rashbi, but Bepashtas it was even Ruach HaKodesh. In other words, I don't know that there is enough of a historical trail to say that from the time that the Zayah was written, which is 1800 years ago, until this day, it was known that Lag Ba'emet was his yahrzeit. I don't know. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm saying I don't know.
Specifically, Lag Ba'emet was
The yahrzeit of Reb Shem Bar Yochai. The other thing that Rabbi Akiva students didn't die, there is a historical record.
But the day that Rabbi Shem Bar Yochai
Passed away, the Zohar tells the story, but the date is not in the Zohar. The date comes from some other source, and I don't know what it is. Okay, next. Five. Chevra, you're supposed to write answers. Shalom Be'er, you have a paper and you have a pen, you're supposed to write answers. I know I can't compete with Lego, but like I say, if you're going to read Stephen King, at least make sure I don't see. 5. But Stephen King Mailer, Lego, it's another madreg of humiliation. If I'm losing to Legos, I'm bad. Oh, Van Halen, come here. Why don't you speak? Now, you're Binyamin Yankiv.
Yes. Yeah, but what do you call downstairs?
I have a Binyamin Yosef.
Yeah.
You spell H with a big H or a small H?
Big H.
You're mamish a Viking. Oh, but mamish. Do me a favor. Don't kill any more Europeans. They're still cowardly and stupid, but don't kill anymore. You own Europe anyway. It's all yours. The Normans are the Vikings. The British elite, the Vikings conquered the world, and they became a part of our world. Europe, not our world. We're Jews. 5. What is the story that I told you about the Ida Rabbe and the Ida Zut? What is the story I told you about? The Ida Rabbe and the Ida Zut. I don't know, this is written gefährlich. What is the story that I told you about the Ida Rabbe and the Ida Zuta? And then it says again, this story. So I gotta fix this somehow, but anyway. The question is, the implication of the question is clear. What's the story? It's a it's a very disturbing story. You have to be not a tzaddik, a very big tzaddik for this story to be meaningful and not frightening. Rabbi Shimba Yochai had 9 friends. And together they constituted a minyan. And it says in Kabbalah Sfarim, it says in the notes on the Zohar from the Tutsi Zohar from the name of the Rachav, that the 10 men, which includes Rabbi Shimba Yochai and his son and Rabbi Abba, who was his scribe, and the others, were the 10 Sfiras. Chochma Bina, Keser Chochma Bina, they don't really count us. Keser Chochma Bina, Chesed Gevurah Teferes Netzach Chod Yesod Malchus. And they convened in a room. It's called the Idra Rabbah, the Great Chamber. And people say, you know where these chambers are in Miran? There's caves. You know, they say this is the Rabbah, this is the Zuta. Again, all of this is from the Arizal, trust me. Which is a good enough source, but it's not in the Goyish, but it's not historic. It's from Ruach HaKodesh. And they studied Kabbalah. These 10 men getting together, and their studying of Kabbalah is in the Zohar and Parshas Nasai. It's a long section. The fancy schmancy Kabbalah, all the exotic stuff in Kabbalah, the whole Zohar is Kabbalah. But the 2 difficult sections of Kabbalah, the really hard stuff, is the Ida Rabbe and Parshas Nasai, and the Ida Zud and Parshas Azinu. So they got together and they studied Kabbalah. And Rabbi Shimba Yochai was teaching, and they were all listening, and there were fires flying around. There was mamash, very holy, very, very lofty. As they were studying Kabbalah, 3 of the Chevra checked out. They did another Manaviyu. The neshama went up like a smoke to the heavens. The neshama left the guf as they were studying Pnimis HaTeira. To use a language which you have in Chumash Rashi, they died from a kiss. Most people die because the body breaks down, the machine stops working. They passed away because the Eibishter came and kissed their neshama and sucked it out of the guf from the top down. They died from a lakus. They died from godliness. That's what it means, Mizas Neshikim. What does it mean that Moshe Rabbeinu died from a kiss? That Aaron HaKohen died from a kiss? That Miriam Anaviyah, Moshe Rabbeinu's and Aaron HaKohen's sister, passed away from a kiss? Al Pi Hashem. It means that they passed away not because the body broke, but because the neshama was pulled out by a high Oyed Elaki, which is the story of Nadav and Avihu. But Nadav and Avihu went looking for it. They did it to themselves. And the way you learn the Likutei Sichos, what Nadav and Avihu did was not an Aveda. If anybody would do the same thing, it would be an Aveda. Nadav and Avihu were allowed to do it because the law had not yet been written that you're not allowed. Rabbi David ben Yishai, Avdocha Mishechecha, younger man, here's your maimer and the question sheet. You'll give them both back at the end of the class.
They were allowed to go and drunk.
They wasn't drunk. You see, we hold like they had a Achei Temimim. There's 6 different. What does it mean they were drunk?
Drunk.
They were drunk from Chassidus, not from Mashke. Just like the story of Rabbi Nabzeira. The way they explain the Pikabol. The Achei Temimim and Pashas Achei Temimim explains that they were drunk from studying Seidus HaTeira, the secrets of Teira, but they were not careful to do the Yatza B'Shalom, right? You have in the Gemara, Rabbi Kiva, and the Ben Azai, and Ben Zayman, and Elisha Ached, Nichnesu L'Pardes, they started learning Kabbalah. One of them became crazy, one of them passed away, and one of them never became a kafir. Chitas Benetias. And Rabbi Kiva was Nichnes B'Shalom Yatza B'Shalom. He went in peace and he came out in peace. So the Rebbe says the only reason Rabbi Kiva survived is because before he started, he knew I need to step out of this. And that's the story with the Alter Rebbe of eating the bagel and butter after him and the Malach did the same exercise. The Alter Rebbe and the Besitcher Magid's son, the Malach, did the Nadav and Avihu thing. They went and they made a circle around themselves. They stood inside, they did meditations till the neshama was about to leave the guf, and then they stepped out of the circle. And the Alter Rebbe was eating a bagel with butter. Butter, cream, richness, fat. So the Malach says to him, after you do an extra day, you said, need bread. Alter Rebbe said, Pasha, I need to bring my neshama back into my guf. But Nadav and Avihu were allowed to do it because the Isser had not yet been given. After they did it, Abish says no more. Yain v'sheichar al teisht. These two tzaddikim did this avoid of Kaleis HaNefesh. You talk about the holiest of Jews.
Yeah, but this time that these two tzaddikim did it, now the world was written. They're doing it after.
Correct. So the Maimorim asked the Shaila, the plus of Saba, Shemesu Be'idra, these three sages who died in the Idra, why was that not an Aveda? The Maimorim actually asked that question. And the answer that's given is because it was their time. They were supposed to die anyway. But not one of you died early, premature. And according to one of the reasons that they passed away, they had no children, never got married. Like Ben Azai and Ben Zeba, they didn't get married, they had no kids. Like Ben Azai. And there's 6 different reasons why Nadav and Avihu passed away. 6 in the Ibn Chaya. But the Chassidus brings the reason of Shtuya Yayin, Nichsul Mikdash, Api Pnimis Anyon. So imagine 10 people get together, they study Kabbalah, and 3 of them, the Kabbalah is so powerful that the Neshama literally floats out of the goof, goes up to heaven, and doesn't come back down. It doesn't come back down. And it was not considered an Aveda because it was their time. Years later, listen to the story alone, they still have your attention. Yeah? Rabbi Shimba Yechai calls together the remaining Chevra. Now there's only 7 of them, 3 of them passed. He says, let's do it again. Let's make Nacham al Cheder, either Zuta, it's called the small Cheder, there's only 7 of them. They were missing 3. And we'll study Kabbalah. And he said to them up front, and this time, my Neshama is going to go up Lamaila. Could you imagine a Rebbe should call a chassid, say, let's get together, let's have a Fabringen, and during the course of this Fabringen, I'm going to pass away. How exciting is that? Huh?
And one of them's your son.
One of them is his own son. You know, the Maisa is, that's exactly how the Mittler Rebbe passed away. The Mittler Rebbe passed away exactly like that. But he didn't give the Chassidim a heads up. He didn't tell them before, okay, tonight we're going to say Chassidus all night, and exactly when at the morning star, Aleisa Shachar, I'm going to be in the middle of a Maimed, I'm going to say the word Chaim, just like Reb Shimon Yochai said the word Chaim, and I'm going to stop speaking, and then you'll know my neshama is floated out of my goof. The Middle Ebbs Chassidim were not Kalim for it. They were great people, but they were not the Shimon Yochai's Chaverim. And they also went to his Levaya singing, because he also said to be Besimcha. The Middle Rebbe, but they were also crying. They were singing and crying. Reb Shimon ben Yochai's Talmidim were Besimcha. So they got together. You see, the thing about Reb Shimon ben Yochai, he's like the Rebbe, you know what I'm saying? You can't control him. He does what he has to do, and you're there. So you get to see this Gilead Lakus, and things that happen that are not to your liking, and all you can do is experience it. You can't change it. They were not going to change it. So they came. The whole Chevra showed up. Reb Shimon ben Yochai says 10 dafim, 20 pages of Kabbalah, and at the end, they describe how his neshama passed, left the goof. They couldn't see him, and then they saw him, and then they couldn't see him again, and then they could see him again. There was a big fire. It's a very, very I have a class on my website where I read the story of Reb Shimon ben Yochai's passing away. On my Lag Ba'ima section, I read the story person inside, and I explained it. It's Kabbalah word. I explained a little bit what it means, the way that Reb Shimon ben Yochai passed away. But it's, you imagine he called his Chavedim, his students, who loved him very much. He said, we're going to study Torah, and from this Torah, I'm going to get my kiss. That's going to raise me up to a higher madrega of life. That's the answer to question 5. Now 6.
So if I work for 5, they learned so hard they died, is that an acceptable answer? Because that's essentially that's the story summarized.
Sure.
I would like for you to write more words, but I'm not going to grade you for your answer. I'm going to grade you for paying attention and being a part of the class. That's how this works. The writing the answers is just that you participated.
Was he part of the 3 people?
No. They did it twice. The first time they did it, it's called the Idra Rabbah, the big group. There were 10 of them. 3 of them passed. Then he called them later, years later. He says, remember what happened last time? Let's do it again. But this time it's my turn. Could you imagine? How awesome. Well, it's not sad, it's not happy, it's awesome. What kind of tzaddik could be in the presence of his Rebbe the tzaddik, who he knows up front that the end of this event is going to be that there's not going to be the goof of Reb Shimon ben Yochai in the world. That's how great the Talmidim were. Verstehst? Okay, question 6. What is the obvious irony about the interface between these two reasons to celebrate Lag BaOmer? In other words, question 1 and question 3. Because one is a celebration for the opposite of death, and the other is a celebration for the opposite of life. How could one day be accounting for two things that are literally polar opposites? 180 degrees opposite. Here we're saying, thank God nobody passed away. And that itself is a kasha. If Kula Meis of Asa Pedic, I looked up the Gemara, it says Pedic, not Shah. They all passed away between Pesach Latzeres in those 7 weeks. And then one day they stopped dying. If you go in the Shita that they continue to die the next day, so what's the Yom Tov? They took a break?
They were also all basically already dead.
Why?
There were 5 of them, right?
Yeah, but there were 24,000 to start.
Yeah, that's crazy.
24,000!
Yeah.
Right, that's what I said. If they all of them died, what's a celebration? You were not here on Monday. There's two
They
Shitas.
stopped dying when there's 5 of them left. It's not that crazy.
Yes, so but there's two opinions. One opinion says that they interrupted the dying. The next day they continued to die.
What, the 5?
No. The 24,000, they died in 32 days. We know they died in 32 days, but there's two opinions what the 32 days are. One is from the second day Pesach till Lamed Beis BaOmer. The other one is from Rosh Chodesh Iyar, Beizia, till the Shoshes Me'akbal.
So they just had a break.
So they push out a break. So what's the Yom Tov?
Rare.
Huh? They got a day off. Today's no Levias. Mamish. If 24,000 people passed away in 32 days, that's about 667 people per day. Or something like that. And it's 3/4, it's not 2/3. So it's 750 people per day. Think about it. So one day nobody passes away. Yom Tov. Okay, what's the answer? 7. What's the resolution to this question? And the answer is there's two kinds of Jews. There's a nigla Jew and a nista Jew, a revealed Jew and a secret Jew. If you're a revealed Jew and your body is missing, that's a tragedy because you're not here in a revealed way. Most of the Tanoim were in the Madrega of Nigla. Most of the Tanoim were in the Madrega of Nigla. The Tanoim, Madrega of Nigla, look at everything of what you see with your physical eyes. If you were here on Monday, which was the day, with the first day that we came back here, I spoke to you that in the olden days, when people were very sensitive, people didn't use the word death like we do. They didn't even say pass away. Does anybody remember, what was the Yiddish expression that I told you? You hear the tapes of the Rebbe. When people want to describe that someone passed, what was the expression that they would use?
Mace.
Huh? You were here. That they were missing. That they felt they were missing. In the old, when you said someone died, everybody said gefelt. Someone's presence was absent. And I told you this is why the Rebbe said, That's right. That's why when you comfort a mourner, you say Hamokim. Hamokim is the name of the Eibishter. But Hashem has 100 names. Why did we choose this one? Because the idea of a death is that the space is empty. The person's still alive. He's just not in physical space. You can't see him. The neshama is forever. So Hashem should fill the space which has now been emptied by the lack of that person's physical presence. Hamokim, the space should be filled. Hamokim minachem eschem v'seich sh'ar avel etzim b'dishaloyim. Hamokim, the space. So Rabbi Akiva was a nigla person. It's hard to call Rabbi Akiva a nigla person because Rabbi Akiva was the Rebbe of Rashbi who wrote the Zohar, for heaven's sake. But Talmidei Rabbi Akiva, so their death is a tragedy and their not dying is a Yom Tov. But Rabbi Shimon is a secret, is a nista person, is a mystical person. And on the mystical level, not only does the neshama not die, but when a person leaves the guf, the neshama has an aliyah to a higher world. So that's why for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai it's a Yom Tov. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai wanted that we should celebrate this Yom Tov. Every Jew till the end of time should Lag BaOmer make a Yom Tov, make a simcha. Hilula de Rashbi, the joy of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. The word Hilul actually means the wedding. The joy equal to a chasana of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. We're good? Back to the Maimon. Actually, I shouldn't say back to the Maimon. Now let's go to the Maimon. I mean, I haven't done much learning. You with me? Let's go. Lahavin inyan hilula de Rashbi. This Maimon is explaining what is the word hilula. Hilula means simchas chasana. The joy of the passing of Rabbi Shimon. Why are we happy on the day that Rabbi Shimon Yochai passed away? Lama nikra b'shem. Hilula. Why is it called a celebration? Why is it called a chasana? V'haloi. Who speaks Hebrew? V'haloi. V'haloi. And emphasis. It's an extra word. Haloi. Emphasis, or arguably, nikvatainis al misas tzadikim v'cholu. There's a halach on Shulchan Aruch. Do you know that? It's a law in Jewish law that people should fast on the day that their parents died. You know that? Elechi yidden have tainis yom shemeis be'ava imei. There are Jews, I've met such people. The Rebbe is very not into fasts. But klal, you fast the minimum. We just fast the 6 times, 5 plus Yom Kippur. We don't fast extra. But on Moloch side, people fasted a lot. I met a man who told me that he fasted on his father's yard side, and he fasted on his mother's yard side. Yom shemeis be'ava imei. When a person loses his father, he fasts. A person loses his mother, is fast. And you also fast on the day the passing of tzaddikim. There are tiniest of misas tzaddikim. There are from Judaism, maybe even by Sfardim, for sure by Ashkenazim, that when a tzaddik passed away, make a yard site. By Chassidim, a yard site is what are yard sites for? Huh? To skip Tachnun. That's what yard sites are for. Yeah. Why do we have? You go into some Chassidic shuls, they have a list on the wall for literally every day of the year. No Tachnun today. Who passed away? This tzaddik, that tzaddik, the other tzaddik. Everyone's Chassidim. So the Rebbe actually asked the Fiyah to get up with this question. How come in Poile, when you have yard site of a tzaddik, you don't say Tachnun, and by us we do say Tachnun? And the Fiyah gave him a cryptic answer. He said in Yiddish, and I quote, "When then is da a beser tzeit zachen Tachnun?" When then is there a better time to say Tachnun? Tachnun is tshuva. Tachnun is confession. A tzaddik passes away, he's supposed to be aroused, he's supposed to be awakened, he's supposed to be moved. So you do tshuva. So by Chsidei Poilin, huh? Because the question is if the passing of tzaddik is a yom tiv. Why do we not say Tachnun? The Frierdiker Rebbe didn't say it's not a yom tiv. He said even though it's a yom tiv, you're dafka saying Tachnun because you want to do tshuva. But in Poland, a yard set of a tzaddik, especially if it's in your geza, I don't know which bells. Let's say by the bells of Rebbe's, I don't know how it is again. In Satmar, they don't say Tachnun on Chav Tes of the yard set of the other Satmar. But they only keep that yard site. They don't keep other yard sites. Some Hasidic groups keep all the yard sites of many tzaddikim. You want to say Tachnun? Chabad says Tachnun because of this reason that the Frierdiker Rebbe gave. It's an opportunity to do tshuva. No. Chabad was always this way. Chabad, we only don't say Tachnun on Yemei Geula, on the days of Father B'Shalom Nafshi Mikrov L'Kivrab Ma'yamadi, which we have 4, not 3, 4. Yud Kislev, Yud Beis Tammuz, and Chamisha B'Teres. Don't ever forget that. Go ahead.
Would you mind re-explaining 7? I don't really understand.
The answer?
It's good that Rashi.
No. Whenever a person passes B'chlal, a person has a guf and a neshama, a nigla and a nista. There's the revealed and there's the hidden. Tzaddikim, whose ikir inyan was nigla, when they passed away, their nigla is gone. You can't see their guf, so you fast. But tzaddikim, with ikir inyan is nista, when the person passes away, the neshama has an aliyah, the biggest aliyah. So since Rashbi was a nista yid, even down here we celebrate it as a yom tov, not just up there. So the shaila is in halacha, a yortzeit is a fast day, and in Kabbalah and in B'negei Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the yortzeit is a simcha. How do you reconcile those two things? You with me? Hallo, umevayer bazer Rabbeinu was up. Menachem Mendel Shlita.
So do we say Tachnun on Gimel Tammuz?
Okay, we would say Tachnun on Gimel Tammuz. Mitzad the inyan of Gimel Tammuz, we should say Tachnun. But I was once at the oil, a few years after Gimel Tammuz, on Gimel Tammuz, we were davening mincha, and I said, "Don't say Tachnun." And the guy started to scream at me, "You idiot!" Because Gimel Tammuz is the Chag HaGeula of the Frierdiker Rebbe also. The Frierdiker Rebbe went out of jail Gimel Tammuz. Now he wasn't completely freed. He went off to his exile. He was completely freed on Yud Beis Tammuz. But our Rebbe said many times that Gimel Tammuz is for us a bigger yom tov than Yud Beis Tammuz. Because Yud Beis Tammuz, the Frierdiker Rebbe was freed, Ishbel to spread Yiddishkeit, which is what he cared about. But Gimel Tammuz, his life went out of physical danger, which is what we care about. So Gimel Tammuz is one of the 2 days that the Rebbe said, it depends how you feel. So you say Tachan on Gimel Tammuz, so you say Tachan on Chayel, totally depends how you feel. Now my feeling is that in Gimel Tammuz you shouldn't say Tachan, not because of the Rebbe, because of the Friedrich Rebbe. Now what happens when you have a date that has 2 opposite inyanim? So a lot of people are saying, like the Rebbe said, you have to do tshuva today. Say Tachnun. And I feel that since by the Friedrich Rebbe nicht gesagt Tachnun, the Rebbe didn't want to say Tachnun on his Yatzeit. He never made arrangements that on his Hilula we're not going to say Tachnun. That's how I look at it. But I got screamed at, it was almost violent. So I said, okay, do whatever you want. But not saying Tachnun Gimel Tammuz is not mitzad of Gimel Tammuz, it's the Friedrich Rebbe's Chag HaGeula. Huh? But the only people who don't say Tachan Zayin is a Rebbe after he becomes a Rebbe.
No, I'm saying Haman chose other because Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, but his birth.
But that's a different story. That's another Maaseh. Because only Moshe Rabbeinu was a special kind of tzaddik. It's a whole sikh, and look what this is. Okay, let's keep reading. Okay, let's keep going. And please look inside. Alter Rebbe explains. Al pi agdama, but before he can explain why, when many tzaddikim pass away, it's fakert, it's a fast day. But when Reb Shimon by Yechoy, that means a tzaddik connected to pnimius HaTorah, a tzaddik connected to what's called oir HaTorah, the light of Torah, or the face of Torah, Kabbalah passes away. It becomes a hilula. In order to explain this, the Alter Rebbe goes off on a tangent. Yesh hefresh bein neshames lemalachim. There's a difference between souls and angels. Now you'll see in a minute, Rabbi Yossi, that there really isn't a difference between souls and angels. There's a difference between souls down here and souls and angels up there. Up there, the souls and the angels are the same. Only down here are the souls different than the angels. What's the difference? Sha'malachim nikrayim aimdim. Angels are called standing still. Va'aneshames nikrayim mahalchim, and souls are called being in motion. Right? When you play football, right? So everyone has to set, and then a guy goes in motion, right? I don't know all the halachas, how many people are allowed to go in motion before the ball is snapped. There's all kinds of chukim. Someone's in motion. That's my marshal. On the Shama in this world is in motion. He's not fixed in his place. Kabbalah Koth says in the Pasuk, God Almighty says to Yeshaya Hanavi, Isaiah is in a room full of angels, and the Abishah tells him, I'm going to give you movers, beings that are in motion. It's a pasuk in Zechariah. It's Zechariah, not Yeshaya. In the Mekabeh V'chai. Bein ha'oim, amongst those who are stationary. Malachim are stationary, and I'm adding as a bracket, neshamas in Gan Eden are also stationary. Down here, the neshama is a mahalach. The neshama is in motion. So the Alter Rebbe says, if you want to know about Ilul Rashbi, you're going to have to wait a while. You know how long you're going to have to wait? You're going to have to wait till the bottom page 673. And I don't even know if we're going to get to before the year is out. But the end of the Maimon goes back to explain Rashbi. In order to answer the question about Reb Shimon, we go off on this tangent about being in motion and standing still. Now, Rabbi say, I want you to understand the significance of this, okay? Malachim and Gan Eden daven every day 3 times. We even know what they say, because we repeat after them. What do they say? Kaddish, Kaddish, Kaddish. Baruch Hashem K'imei. When we say Kedusha, we're actually saying the Kedusha, the Malachim. Yeah. The Srafim say Kaddish. In the Siddur it says, the Srafim and the Chayis and the Fanim say Baruch. There's probably more tefillos that we don't know, but we say Kedusha, we're literally repeating the tefillah of the Malachim. And it says in Kabbalah, the Malachim daven, they go from a world to a world, they go from level to level. Neshames in Gan Eden are also moving around 3 times a day. You know that in Kabbalah we know that every year in the Yartat the Neshama has an Aliyah. But the truth of the matter is that every single day the Neshama has 3 Aliyahs. Shachas is an Aliyah, Mincha is an Aliyah, and Ma'ariv is an Aliyah. Shabbos there are 4 Aliyahs, because you have Musaf. Yom Kippur you have 5 Aliyahs, because there's Ne'ilah. So the Neshamas have multiple Aliyahs. And believe me, they're moving faster than we do. They understand the Gemara better. They're not bored. They don't have cell phones, and they're not on Twitter, and they're not interested in Narishkeiten. The Neshamas and Malachim are growing like you have no idea. They grow and they grow and they grow and they grow, and it's all considered standing still. Down here, we make a baby step. You know, one day I put away my phone and I didn't want it back till the next morning. We're called in motion, we're called growing, and they're called standing still. It's weird. Malachim are so holy, they're so pure, they're so beautiful, they're so righteous. And they're called standing in one place. We are so complicated, that's a very nice word, yes. And we're called in motion. Why? Because their world is pre-programmed. They feel like they have free will. They do. They feel like they have free will.
They do.
Yeah. But the reality is their free will is supported by their environment. There's no challenge. I'm not saying that there's no work. I'm just saying there's no opposition. A malach gets up every day as if malachim sleep, and he says Kaddish. He davens.
They feel like they free will, but they know they don't.
I don't know what they know. The Rambam describes malachim as having free will. The Rebbe brings from the Alter Rebbe, depends which level of malachim. Malachim avitzir that don't have free will. Malachim abriya do have free will. It gets very complicated. But al pi chassidus, they don't really have free will. Their free will means they're free to exercise their spiritual potential, which the Eibishter gave them. And they have to work to do it. But there's no real challenge. There's no Yetzer Hara. So they grow substantially. They grow better than we do. They learn more Torah than we'll ever learn. And it's considered standing in one place. Because any time, any being actualizes the potential the Eibishter gives you without exceeding it, that's called standing still. Being in motion means breaking barriers. What we call in our culture, Yetzias Mitzrayim. There is no breaking barriers in Gan Eden, not for Malachim, and you'll see a little bit later on, not for Neshamas either. Down here, right, what do we say? Don't ask. Let's not discuss it. It's a personal question. You listening to me?
Yes.
But when we fight, and we win a little tiny battle, we're higher than the Malachim's Avodah, we're higher than the Neshamas, the Gan Eden's Avodah. We're called being in motion. Mahalach. Because even though the Eibishter gave us a neshama, and he programmed our neshama, when we fight our fights and we win, even if it's only occasionally, we have broken a barrier. So the Navi, in the time of the first Beis Hamikdash, at the end of the first, whatever, Zechariah actually was not at the end of the first Beis Hamikdash yet. No, he was after the Churban, right? He was the very last Nevi'im. Zechariah says, I went up there, and I saw a vision of the Merkava, and the Malachim were doing amazing stuff. They're unbelievable, so chassidish. They're such good bakrim. Not one of them is an Achei. They're all in Tamchei. They're holy rollers, and they're standing in one place. And there I was with all of my chesreinis, and I'm the lowest student in Achei, and I'm a mahalach. They're standing still, and I'm in motion. Why? Because the avodah down here is exceeding his limitations. Now I want to finish this class with a vort that doesn't say in the Maimed, okay? The Alter Rebbe struggles with this in Tanya. How could it be that they move so far, they're called standing still, and we move so little and we're considered in motion? So he gives a moedendika mashal. I need your attention, please. It's not going to take long. This is the 12th chapter of Yigeres HaTshuva. It's the last chapter of the Alter Rebbe's treatise, Alter Rebbe's letter on Tshuva. He says like this, okay? If you stand on earth and watch shadow move, it's a clear day, there's no clouds. There's a bright sun overhead, and you're watching your own body, or you're watching a fire hydrant, and you're patient enough to stand in one place long enough to watch the shadow move. So as you get closer and closer to 12 o'clock, the shadow is going to get narrower and darker. When you're literally at midday, the shadow is going to be right directly beneath your feet. The minute you go past 12 o'clock, the shadow is going to appear on the other side of you. It's going to be very small and very dark. Every minute later than midday, the shadow is going to become elongated and less strong. Near the end of the day, at dawn and at dusk, your shadow is very long because the sun is either in the extreme east, extreme west, but it's very, very dull. So the Alter Rebbe says, I want to ask you a question. How many miles did the sun travel for your shadow to move an inch?
Hundreds of trillions.
How many miles did the sun travel for your shadow to move an inch? Now remember, according to Gochmes Chitzonius, the sun is not in motion, the earth is. But according to Torah, according to Rambam, the sun is rotating around the earth. And the earth is standing still, completely still. There isn't even an axis, which is crazy. Because there's a physical bulge. The Rebbe says the earth is not budging. There's no axis, there's no tilt. According to the... I want you to show it to me.
I will.
The Rambam does not talk about a spin, doesn't talk about an axis, doesn't talk about a tilt, doesn't talk about a rotation. The Rebbe writes that the earth is standing still. He wouldn't disagree with the Rambam. He bases it on a pasuk. Nissen Mendel used to write the Talks and Tales. He wrote a whole thing, The Nature's Wonderland, he wrote a whole thing about the earth's axis, that it tilts winter, and there's also a rotation. Every 24 hours, the earth spins 24,000 miles. It's going 1,000 miles an hour. Yeah, so that's why there's a day and a night. There's no day and night because they're going around the sun. Because they're coming facing the sun or facing away from the sun. And they ever crossed out that whole section
I asked you that.
and wrote, the earth is not budging. So according to Torah, the sun literally rotates around the entire earth every 24 hours, which is so hard to imagine.
I asked you this.
It's moving at extremely rapid speed.
Way faster than light.
L'chayr, it's faster than light. I didn't do the math, but it's extremely
More
fast.
than double.
But you see, but the vart is, according to Torah, the sun isn't moving. The space, the galgal, the space. In other words, the sun is actually still, like the earth is still. The space is moving. There's a Gemara Masechta Pesachim. It's a machlokes Chachmei Yisrael and Chachmei Umetz. It's a weird thing. So we accept obviously Torah, we don't understand it, we accept it, that the sun is rotating around the earth, moving at exceeding speed. So when a minute passes and your shadow went from being this big to being this big, the sun travels millions of miles. So the Rebbe says, Alter Rebbe says, that's how you have to look at a mitzvah that a person does on earth. But it's inverse. You moved an inch. Lambaila, you move millions of miles. He does it backwards. Just like for the shadow on earth to move a small amount, the heavenly bodies have to move incredible distances. The opposite is also true. When something tiny happens on earth, on high, it's a huge journey. So we may think, Malachim are so chassidish, they're all in Tomchei now. One of them is an Achei. They're all going on good shlichus and they're chassidish abacharim. They're going to all go on shlichus, and they're all standing in one place. And the neshamas nevach and Achei, they have a good day, they have a bad day, they don't show up for 2 weeks, they have to come back for their $100 knas. I don't know what the reasons are. And we're called mahalchim. Because every baby step we make, Allah Maila is millions of miles. Okay, questions or comments? Oh, I need everybody to come back with their maimed and their question sheets. Thank you. I want to do it this way. It won't take long, but it will take time. Thank you. Minutichke, пожалуйста. Just wait 1 minute, I'll get everybody. Okay. Thank you.